This is page 19 in our notes. My colors are black and red, and we are finally to the 6th grade standard for test 2, which is NS.1 Dividing Fractions and Mixed Numbers. So we're going to write NS.1 Dividing Fractions. So on this test, this is the only standard. You either get MS for passing or NM for not meeting the standard. So MS meets the standard for NS1 on dividing fractions. And so that's what we're going to work on. So when we're dividing fractions, if, for example, I give you 2 and I divide it by 1/4. So the way we look at division is we need to look at how many pieces are going to be in the total. So you're always starting with the total and dividing it by this piece and then trying to figure out how many of these pieces would be in 2. So the question I might ask you here would be, how many 1/4 pieces are in 2? And that's a question I'm asking. 2 wholes, how many 1/4 pieces are in 2? Some people can see it. I'm going to draw a little visual. I'm kind of thinking of like pizzas. If I were to draw like a pizza, and if I have 2 whole pizzas, I'm drawing 2 circles. If I divide each one into fourths, kind of something like this, not that it's perfect, kind of like when I cut my pizzas, they're not perfect, but if I cut them into fourths, how many 1/4 pieces are in those 2 holes? There's 1 here, 2, 3, 4. And that makes sense that there are 4/4 in 1 hole. And if I keep counting, 5, 6, 7, 8, that means there would be 8 of those 1/4 pieces in 2 holes. So I know the answer is 8. How does that work with the math? Well, it looks like this. You take 2 divided by 1/4. And what's going to happen here is we're actually going to change colors. Instead of dividing by 1/4, we're going to change the problem, and we're going to take 2, and we're going to, instead of divide by 1/4, we're going to multiply by its reciprocal, and we're going to multiply by 4 over 1. So 1/4's reciprocal is like flipping these around, and you multiply by 4 over 1. And so 2 is like putting 2 over 1, and you multiply by 4 over 1, just like we learned in the last lesson on multiplying fractions. Simplify and multiply. Well, 1 is what I have on the bottom, so I know it's just going to be out of 1. 2 times 4 on the top gives me 8. 8 out of 1 is the same thing as saying 8. So 8 of the 1/4 pieces are in the 2 holes. So the answer is 8, and we kind of knew that with our drawing, but that's kind of how that works. And you're probably wondering, why did we switch a division problem into a multiplication problem? Why is dividing by 1/4 okay to multiply by 4 over 1? And I'm going to show you how that works next. Draw a line here. The word reciprocal, you heard me say it, reciprocal. It is RECIPROCAL. I'm going to box that in, reciprocal. What does that mean? How does this work? Reciprocal, 2 numbers whose product equals 1. 2 numbers, number sign to shorthand that, whose product equals 1. And do you remember what the word product means? When I hear product, that means to multiply. So 2 numbers that when you multiply them, it's going to equal 1. So for example, I took 1/4, and instead of dividing by 1/4, I said to multiply by 4 over 1. And what happens when I do this? I could do simplify and multiply, or I could just multiply straight across. 1 times 4 is 4, and 4 times 1 is 4. Well, 4/4 is the same thing as saying 1, so that's why that works. When I take 1/4 and I multiply it by its reciprocal, 4 over 1, I get the answer 1. So it's like the problem never changes, because when you multiply something by 1, it never changes the problem. 3 times 1 is still 3. 10 times 1 is still 10. 100 times 1 is still 100. So let me show you another example of that. If I give you 2/3 and I want you to multiply by its reciprocal. What's its reciprocal? Instead of 2 over 3, I flip it around, I'd have 3 over 2. And you could do simplify and multiply, or you can multiply across. 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 2 is 6. 6 over 6 is the same thing as 1. And so that works. So that works with fractions changing to their reciprocal. What does it look like if I give you a mixed number and have you change it to its reciprocal? For example, if I give you 3 and 1/3, how do you change that to its reciprocal? Well, the first thing you need to do, this is a mixed number, you would want to use the check mark method or the backward C to change it to an improper fraction. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1 is 10. 10 over the same denominator, 3. So this number, as a mixed number, it looks like this as an improper fraction. What's its reciprocal? You just flip it around. 3 over 10 would be its reciprocal. So how does that work? Let's do some examples to see. Draw a line. I'm going to move this up so you can see. So the next example I have is 3 divided by 1/6. 3 divided by 1/6. So remember with division, you're always having a total and you're dividing it by parts, and you're asking how many of those parts would be into the total. So the question I want to ask is how many 1/6 pieces are in, and our total was 3, right? So how many are in 3? And instead of drawing a picture here, I'm just going to solve it with math, showing you we would take 3 and we would write it as 3 over 1. And instead of dividing by 1/6, we need to multiply by its reciprocal. And 1/6's reciprocal would be 6 over 1. And so now you're just ready to simplify and multiply, and you really can't simplify. So 3 times 6 gives us 18 over 1 times 1 is 1. So 18 is your answer. Did I answer the question? How many 1/6 pieces are in 3? There are 18 of the 1/6 pieces in 3. So I want to draw a line here and put a couple stars because there's something important for your test. So I want to make sure you know on your test, put a couple stars here. Dividing by a number is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. And I want you to read that to yourself quietly 3 times. Dividing by a number is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. Dividing by a number is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. Dividing by a number is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. That's why you can change a division problem into a multiplication problem. So you actually already know how to do this standard because you learned it in 5th grade. So we're going to turn the page and we're going to do a couple more examples on page 20.